I guess the key challenge is becoming aware of yourself and realizing where you need to grow. Realizing that it's actually about you. Well, what do I mean by that? It's about pretty much everything that happens, pretty much where you are now, is because of the decisions on the whole that you have made. Mm-hmm. Sure, if you run out into the road and you get hit by a car and, God forbid, and something bad happens, you couldn't control that. But if you get hit by a car and you're in hospital for a while, or if you lose an arm, you can still control what happens afterwards. Okay, I haven't got an arm, so what am I going to do about it? And so you've got to realize your limitations and see how you can address them.
Welcome to Push to Be More with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. Now, this is a show that talks about the stuff that makes life work. And to help us do just that, today I'm chatting with Zafar Karim, also known as Zaf, from Block Apt, about where he's had to push through, what he does to recharge his batteries, and what does growth look like? What does more look like for him? Now, the show notes and transcript from our conversation will be available on our website, pushtobemore.com. And also on our website, you can sign up for our newsletter. And each week we will email you the links and the notes from the show automatically. They go straight to your inbox totally for free. So do make sure you sign up for that. Now, this episode is brought to you by Orion Media, which helps entrepreneurs and business leaders like you set up and run their own successful podcast. Why on earth would you want to do that, you may ask yourself? Well, let me tell you. I have found running my own podcast to be insanely rewarding. It is one of the best marketing tools that I've ever come across. It opens doors to amazing people like nothing I have seen. I've built networks, made friends, and had a platform to champion my customers, my team, and my suppliers. And I think just about every entrepreneur and business leader should have a podcast just because it's had such a huge impact on my own business. Now, of course, this all sounds great in theory, but in reality, there's a whole bunch of problems, aren't there? Like setup, distribution, strategy, tech. I mean, the whole list goes on. And this is where Orion Media enter into the scene. They take all of that off your plate. You see, I love talking to people, but I'm not a big fan of production and editing. I'm just not, which is why Orion Media do it. I do what I'm good at, and they brilliantly take care of the rest. So if you're wondering if podcasting is a good marketing strategy for your business, have a look, check them out. orionmedia.com. That's AURION media.com. They've got some great free resources on there that you can also check out. So do check that out. orionmedia.com. Now, let's talk about today's guest. Emerging from the humble streets of East End London to the prestigious halls of Cambridge University, Zaf exemplifies success and resilience in the tech business world. A business maestro, he has mastered the art of steering fledgling tech companies to towering IPOs, following an illustrious decade-long journey in investment banking with titans like the Solomon Brothers, the Rothschilds. I mean, beyond a seasoned business leader, Zaf is trailblazing Oxbridge alumni, being the first in his family and the sole representative from his school to attain this milestone. That's a heck of a bio, Zaf. I'm not going to lie. It's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me. How are we doing?
No, thank you very much for inviting me. I think you over-compliment me, but hey,
I say this quite often now on the podcast, Zaf, that I never read a guest bio until it's live, as we're recording, because I just love the way these things have been written. And the production team do such a great job on them. So great to have you. Are you still in the East End of London? Where are you now in the world?
My office is in London Bridge, but I guess technically I'm in the East End, but it's now called Canary Wharf as opposed to the less salubrious parts of the East End.
Canary Wharf is just a lot more trendy, isn't it? And a lot more fashionable.
It's nice.
Yeah. I do like Canary Wharf. I like to walk around there late at night whenever I'm down in London. It's quite a nice place to go. But wow, so you're in the illustrious Canary Wharf. Now, Zaf, let's start off the podcast the way I like to start off the podcast, with the podcast question. And I wonder how many more times I can mention the word podcast. Now, as you know, the show is sponsored by Ori Media. They're a brilliant podcast agency. Can I ask, if you had your own podcast and you could have any guest that you liked on your show, past or present, the only caveat being that they've had a big influence on your life, who would be a guest on your show and why?
Oh my God, that's a difficult one. Look, I'm where I am because I stand on the shoulders of giants,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's people as far-ranging as, say, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now,
Oh, wow.
you might not associate him with academia or tech or something, but he's probably one of the only people I know of who has come from nothing and
Yeah.
been incredibly successful, indeed got to the top of the tree in three highly competitive careers,
Yeah, he has,
bodybuilding,
yeah.
Hollywood, and then politics.
Yeah.
And I've read his biography. It's I normally don't read autobiographies, but his one is actually quite good.
Mm.
I would uh, invite some of the teachers that inspired me while I was at school. I would invite some of the dons that inspired me and gave me an intellectual awakening while I was at Oxbridge. I
Mm.
had some mentors while I was at the banks, and subsequent to that, I'd invite villain characters like Al Fayed, Muhammad Al Fayed, because if you actually read his biography, which is not an autobiography, warts and all, it's quite remarkable what he has achieved given where he came from. The same with Maxwell, Robert
Mm.
Maxwell.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but again, all of these people don't have to be in academia or in business. If you take someone like Mo Farah, the sprinter,
Mm-hmm.
the long
Yeah.
distance runner. Uh, if you actually look at what he's achieved and what's coming out about him, it takes a particular kind of mindset and a resilience to achieve that much. Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
taking away achievements from people that have had a silver spoon or whatever, but it's the distance you've traveled rather
Mm.
than where you end up. And there's lessons to be learned from all of them.
That's so true. That's so true. And it's interesting, isn't it, when you I find like you have done here, Zaf, one of the interesting things that happens when you think about this question, you come up with an answer and you think, well, this person inspired me because of X, Y, and Z, or this person's had an influence on me because of X, Y, and Z. And it just snowballs. You can quickly just keep going and
Absolutely.
keep going and keep going, and the whole level of inspiration is fascinating. What does fascinate me about your answer is no one yet has mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger as a guest on the show, but actually. I think you're right. I think he would make a fascinating guest on the show because he has done it in sort of three areas, and he's back in Hollywood now, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's now making films. I saw that there was a TV series with him, I think on Netflix, and so you're kind of like this guy, him and Sylvester Stallone. In my head, you compare the two of them. Do you know what I mean? But Schwarzenegger has done what Stallone hasn't, in the sense that he has been successful in other arenas, whereas Stallone was
Sure.
always the sort of the actor and the writer. But I would find it fascinating, like you, Zaf. I think that's a great answer. I'm curious though, when
Thank
you
you.
said when you use this phrase, you had an intellectual awakening. I think was it the phrase that you used. What was that? What was that all about?
Um, so, um, my parents were immigrants from Pakistan, and in the 70s, 80s, and there's this very much thing about um, you're either going to be a doctor, an engineer, an accountant, a
Yeah,
physicist, etc. So when I went up to Cambridge, I I actually did A levels in physics, chemistry, maths, and prior to that, as a teenager, I used to program computers. So I was very much in that kind of mold that my parents can hold me up and say,
Mm.
my son's a scientist kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I decided to read economics, much to the annoyance of my parents who thought,
Oh, well.
economics? What's that? Don't forget, this was the mid-80s, mid to late 80s. But even at that time, I had a kind of disdainful view of classics or philosophy
Mm-hmm.
or history. And it's this one. What's the point? And then by the time I got to the end of my Cambridge career, and certainly subsequently, I started realizing how valuable those subjects actually are.
Mm.
Philosophy and the clarity of thought it can give you. History, because if you don't study history and if you don't learn from it, you're destined to repeat it. I mean, that's a cliche, but it's actually true.
Yeah.
Classics, because the the texts that you study are as applicable today as they were, 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And my kind of intellectualization of that is simply the following. Whereas as human beings, we've massively changed our environment. We've advanced, we've gone from walking to horse and cart to electric cars, etc. Fundamentally, the world is about what humans do, and what humans do comes from the brain, and it comes from the intellectual part to the extent of rationalization, but actual making decisions is the emotional part. And believe it or not, the brain hasn't evolved that much in the last 3,000 years.
Mm.
So the things that were applicable to how humans think and the emotions and what
Yeah.
drives humans and what doesn't are as applicable now.
Yeah.
And so it was exposure to those ideas and having debates with people who are reading, in quotes, lesser subjects, which I realize aren't lesser subjects at all. In fact,
Yeah.
they're the basis of so many things. Um, Cambridge taught me to think, how to think. Doing my A levels and O levels, and I did well, but I realized there's a big difference in learning how to think.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's what I'd say. Intellectual awakening. I wish it had occurred earlier, but hey, everybody has different circumstances.
They do, and it's fascinating listening to you talk, Zaf, because I'm smiling because as I get older, the more I realize actually some of the things that I, like you, thought were a bit dull and boring, actually is super interesting all of a sudden. So I remember, again having that moment of realization, probably in my mid-20s, that actually history is actually quite interesting.
Yeah.
And it was only then that I started to really understand it more and started to read around it more. It was only sort of in my, I guess, early 30s that I actually started to care about our grandparents who were in World War II and actually really understanding their story. And I think for me, cinema in a lot of ways has helped bring history to life recently, with the advances in
Yeah.
technology and CGI. But I mean, when I was in my 20s, it was a while ago. Let me just be clear with this is before technology. But I do sit here and think, yes, I do wonder what it was that, or I wonder what it is that is an age thing that makes me appreciate these topics the more I go through life, rather than appreciating them when I had the opportunity to learn and absorb a lot more, like at school, for example. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this.
Growth, maturing.
Mm.
Uh, People mature at different levels. People mature into different things. I'm certainly not the person I was 10 years ago, and I'm probably unrecognizable from the person I was 20 years ago.
Mm.
If I kind of turn that on its head, 30 years ago, I was so clever and everything else. I knew I had nothing to learn. 20 years ago, I was a lot clever and realized I had quite a bit to learn. And now I know nothing. I've still got everything to learn. I
Yeah.
make no assumptions anymore.
Yeah, it is funny that curve that you go through, isn't it? And we often say that about the teenagers. You know, teenagers know everything in the world. Those in their 20s kind of know most things about the world, and then by the time you get to your 40s and 50s, you realise you absolutely know nothing about the world.
Correct.
Uh, it's quite a fascinating journey that we all sort of go on with that. So looking back then, Zaf, over over this period of growth, from your 20s to your 50s, and your sort of remarkable story. What jumps out to you as maybe one or two of the key challenges in life that you sort of had to face, that you came through? What were some of those turning points for you?
Well, look, I think um, eh, you do ask quite deep questions, which is good. um, I guess the key challenge is becoming aware of yourself and realizing where you need to grow, uh, realizing that it's actually about you. Well, what do I mean by that? It's about pretty much everything that happens, pretty much where you are now, is because of the decisions on the whole that you have made.
Hmm.
Sure, if you run out into the road and you get hit by a car, and God forbid, and something bad happens, you couldn't control that. But if you get
Mm,
hit by a car and you're in hospital for a while, or if you lose an arm, you can still control what happens afterwards. Okay, I haven't got
mm,
an arm, so what am I going to do about it?
mm,
And so you've got to realize your limitations and see how you can address them. I think that's the key challenge. So let me put this into perspective. So people say to me, "Oh my God, you're brought up in the East End, and the West Ham football ground was the centre for the National Front and everything else." And
mm,
see, but that's all I knew, and my attitude towards it, yeah. So I just got to deal with it.
mm,
You know, I, I didn't know that my school was not a good school. Yeah, I just did what I did. Now I've got
mm,
exams coming up. I better do some work, right? um, I didn't know that uh, you know th- there was racism then. There's racism now,
mm,
but I didn't see it as a challenge, as something to overcome. I just thought, okay, that's a given. I can blame everything on that, or I can just get on and try and do what I'm going to try and do.
mm,
So they're obstacles, but I don't see those as challenges. Now, when I look back, I realize that at that time, the schooling in my area was very bad. But if you go back 40 years and ask me, I'd just say, no, it's a great school,
mm,
whatever. Yeah. When I go back, say 20 years and 30 years, and I look back and I think, when I started my professional career, there was a lot of ways of behaving and norms and the rest of it, which I just wasn't aware of because I'd never been exposed to this. And I'd never known anyone in my circle of family, friends, anything that exposed to this. But I didn't see that as, oh, that's a challenge. I've got to overcome it. I realize now it took me longer to overcome those things because I had to grow. I had to be aware that I didn't know
mm.
those things. But it wasn't like, oh, that's an obstacle in the way, and how am I going to overcome it?
Yeah.
Do you see my point? So my attitude has always been, well, you just get on with it. And then maybe 5 years later, you're like, my God, everybody else that's done this didn't have that problem to overcome.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it as a challenge at that time. It's just, oh, I just got to get on with it. Like,
Yeah.
I think resilience is really important. In the credit crunch, I suffered very badly. And I basically had to get up and start again. And I wasn't a 20-year-old; I was a 40-year-old.
Mm.
But so what's the alternative? You're going to sit there and mope and tell your friend you had a bad time and everything else, and then 20 years look back and say, "Well, I spent the last 20 years of my life pitying myself."
Mm.
Or you can say, "Well, stuff happens. It probably happened for a reason to teach me a lesson. I don't know. I don't know what the lesson is, but I'm going to bloody well find out."
That's such a great attitude. As you're talking, I'm reminded, Zaf, of an episode we recorded on the podcast quite early on, actually, with a guy called Ram Gidimore, who's also in London, immigrated, I think it was in the 60s, into the UK from India via Kenya, I think it was. Um, Very similar mindset. It's like we have all of these problems, we can't control them, but what can we do? Let's get on and do
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
And it's fascinating listening to you talk. And I don't know, is this something that you learned yourself? Is this something that came through your parents, this attitude? I'm kind of curious where it came from.
It's if you'd asked me these questions before the podcast, I would still have had as much difficulty trying to answer them. But you haven't, so this makes it more difficult. Look, you're really talking about nature versus nurture, I think. And when I was growing up, I was cognizant of the fact that, we were in the East End. Yeah, East End people do this.
Yeah.
I was cognizant of the fact that, there was never much money around. And, there wasn't the internet and stuff, but, you had TV and things. And I just knew I wanted better. This is not what I wanted for my life.
Yeah.
And so that gave me a massive drive. Now let's take the same Zaf Kareem. Let's say I'd been born in much more fortunate circumstances with much more well-endowed parents and a better school and everything else and the rest of it. I may not have had that drive. Because I would have thought, this is pretty good. I want to stay here.
Yeah.
And staying there may still have taken effort, but it might not have taken as much effort. Once you've got that drive, it kind of stays. Sure, it mellows out over time. So is that nature or is it nurture? I think it's a mixture. So I've got 4 siblings, and we have a wide variation in the degrees of success we've had in our lives. I don't just mean career-wise, but otherwise. Yet we were brought up by the same parents in the same circumstances. So yes, there must be some element of nature, but there must be some element of nurture as well.
Yeah.
So so, look, it's a difficult one. Has everybody with my circumstances ended up being as successful or unsuccessful, depending on which part of the tree you're on? No. So yeah, I think it's a drive. I think I've always been fairly driven, from an early age. Just yeah. But nature, nurture, I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And I like how you talk about that, and how it's a mixture of two things. And if you were born into different circumstances, would you still have the drive? I'm kind of curious though, for you, the whole resilience, which I think is a great word. It's not a word we hear a lot of these days, if I'm honest with you.
I had to look it up before I used it.
Brilliant. It's an interesting, because I think if I was to categorize a word at the moment, I don't know if of culture at the moment, I don't know if I'd use the word resilience more than I'd use the word victim, in the sense that everybody's become a victim about various things, and it seems to be the opposite. But I'm kind of curious for you, Zeph. You had this drive. You wanted to develop. You wanted to get out. You wanted to have more. Do you feel like you've done that? Do you feel like you've achieved that, or is it still a quest that you're on?
Look, I think for me, my life in various fields, personal, professional, intellectual, whatever, has basically kind of been fairly volatile, gone up and then suddenly crashed down, and gone up and crashed down. And I was talking to one of my very good friends over Christmas, and funnily enough, about the podcasts that we listen to, while we're out jogging or whatever we're doing. And so she told me what she listens to, and and I said to her, "Oh, I tend to listen to a lot of podcasts about self-improvement."
Hmm.
Um, so, this might be Tony Robbins, it might be, I'm not going to mention others, but, there's lots of
Yeah.
these things. It might be about startups and how you grow startups. It might be about sales. It might be about uh, kind of moral philosophy. Um,
Hmm.
I, I don't want to plug others, but I listen to the Moral Maze, for example, right?
Hmm.
And she, because she's known me for too long, she said, Zaf, you're still on that quest for self-improvement, and but you haven't changed a a dot since I met
Hmm.
you, kind of thing. Like you're still
Yeah.
puerile, immature. But she's a friend of mine,
Yeah.
and so uh, you know, I think the moment you stop pursuing that, I think it would be, for me, it would be a disaster because I mentioned earlier, in my career, there was lots of mores and ways of behaving and doing things which I didn't know because I'd never experienced anything. But because I was so good at other things, I was able to mask them. Now, I wasn't masking them intentionally. I just didn't know I had all those deficiencies.
Yeah.
But over time, I became more and more self-aware, and I've been able to plug those deficiencies. And as a result, across the board, aspects of my life have got better.
Mm.
So I think this is a continuous thing. So I
Mm.
read a hell of a lot, for example, usually fact, biographies, books on business, books on, I don't know, philosophy, et cetera, history, finance, whatever.
Mm.
Every now and again, I read a fiction book because my wife reads a lot of those, and she gives me one of those that she thinks I'll enjoy, and I read, and I think, yeah, this is really good.
Mm.
Um, it's a continual process. Uh, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
continual process.
No, it is. I think that's why they call it growth, right? You keep moving, and
Yeah.
it's one of those. And but I guess the reason I'm asking this question is, when you go back to being a lad growing up in the East End, or you're doing your A levels, or you're at Cambridge, and you're envisioning your life in the future, which is more than what it was in the past. Whether it was the circumstances, the money, whatever it was. Um, I wonder what that sort of younger version of Zaf would think about the where you are now, if that makes sense. Did the younger version anticipate kind of where you are?
No, absolutely not. So when I was at school, I was very much the geek scientist, chemistry, physics, maths.
Hmm.
I designed electronic circuits. They got published in magazines. I wrote computer games which were published, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
Um, and when I went up to university, I decided I wanted to do something that was more real world. So, when you're talking to people, they don't talk about if I drop a stone from a 100-meter building, how long is it going to take to hit the ground? They talk
Mm.
about, bloody hell, when is inflation going to come down? So
Yeah.
I thought, there's this subject called economics. Let's
Yeah.
have a crack.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I went up to university, I read economics, and Cambridge was a different world. It was a foreign world. I ended up there. I applied almost by accident. Because it was so much outside of the realm
Mm.
of my
Yeah.
entire existence. It was because somebody persuaded me to go to an open day, and I went to an open day, and I thought, you know what, if I don't apply, I won't know. So I kind of
Yeah.
applied. Um, but then everything was so new. It wasn't until the first term of my third year that I actually started thinking, oh, what am I going to do? Because economics, you can do lots of things.
Yeah.
And at the time, the most glamorous and highest paying jobs were investment banking and strategic consultancy. So I thought, you know what, give it a go. And I managed to get into Solomon Brothers, which at the time was probably the best investment bank in the world. So, you, if you look at it from that honest perspective,
Mm.
I can't then say, oh, in my first year, I'd planned to be prime minister by the time I was 25 years old, or because it was all so foreign to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was something I saw on TV, and it was for other people. Um, so I was kind of floating along and doing what
Mm.
I do and getting involved in society. But now, I have to make a decision now. What shall I do? And I thought, well, I know these look glamorous and you make a lot of money, and let's go for it.
Yeah.
Um, a few years into my career, I thought, I'd been investment banking all my life and everything else and the rest of it, and I'd be a, gilded banker kind of thing. I was far more wanted to do my own kind of thing, and I left to start doing what I do, which is identify businesses, particularly in tech, get involved, and hopefully make a massive difference, turn them around, grow them, etc., etc. But the kind of planning stage, even I know some of my friends who literally had plans that, they'd be married by the time they were 30 and the rest of it. Um, and they were. And in some ways, their lives, on some measures, gone far better than mine because they actually had a
Mm,
plan. They knew where they were going. But I didn't because,
mm.
from the East End to Cambridge and then investment banking, where you didn't even know what investment banking was at the interview, you just kind of blagged it. Uh, of course, you read all the stuff and everything else, but you didn't really know what it was.
The people still don't know, to be fair, and that's fine.
Yeah, that includes me. And so you can't really plan on that basis when you're moving so well. I
Mm,
certainly couldn't. Now, I'm 54, right? So I kind of have a plan that there's certain things I want to get done in a certain space of time because I've seen I'm standing on sufficient number of shoulders that I can
mm.
look down and say, this is where I am and this is where I want to be. Whereas when I was in the East End, I was standing on no shoulders.
Yeah,
And so I didn't know what existed. So if I don't know what exists there, how can I decide if I want to be there or there or there?
yeah,
Does that
yeah.
make sense?
No, it does totally. It's a very similar story to mine, although I didn't do the investment banking thing, but a very, very, very similar story. So I'm curious then, Zaf, what does more look like for you now? What's growth look like for you now? I don't know if you thought about the sort of next 5, 10, 20 years, what does that sort of look like?
Oh, no, absolutely. So because I've experienced so much more, I kind of, I know people, I don't mean know of, I know people who are billionaires.
Mm,
Um, I know people who are um, working at charities or in need of charity. So I have a much wider
mm,
scope. So I think uh, there's, I'm working on a particular business, Block Apt. I want to grow that. I want to make it as valuable as possible and then pass it on to the next person who can take it to the next level. That seems to be going fairly well, but
mm.
in this arena, startup arena, early stage, it's high risk, very high risk. Um,
Yeah,
so there's that. Then post that, I need to think about what I'm going to do after that. Maybe start up a fund, maybe. So I have a much clearer idea, but that's
yeah.
from a career standpoint. In what I do, I might end up broke, literally,
Mm,
or I might end up being worth 100 million, a
mm,
billion. It's not out of scope. It's not like I'm a partner at a law firm and I know over the next 5 years maybe I'll make a million, a million, a million, a million, and there'll be
mm.
5 million, and that's kind of it. It could be very high, it could be
Yeah,
disastrous.
yeah,
If I achieve the latter, which is the 100 or billion or whatever, I have a very clear idea of what I would want to do with that money, and past a certain amount, the rest I would basically uh, uh, give to charity. And I know
yeah.
precisely what the charity is, and
Mm,
indeed what I'd like them to do with it, and because I have this wider scope now, this
yeah,
wider perspective. It's not just an idea. I know that would cost this, and that would cost this, and that would cost this,
yeah.
and that would cost this kind of thing. Um, Growth. My daughter, who's 8 next month, she's told me that I need to increase my 1 pack to a 6 pack. Otherwise, she's not going to be my daughter anymore. So there's a lot of pressure there. Um, and
Oh,
then
God bless her.
there's uh, I've been very lucky in my life in terms of I've learned a lot. I don't just mean intellectually. I mean in many other ways as well. I'd love to be able to pass that knowledge on.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Again, not taking anything away from my background or the rest of it, but there's lots of aspects of which, if I had a different background, I would have had that knowledge earlier.
Mm, mm,
And it's not knowledge as in hard facts of things; it's ways of doing things, with et
mm.
cetera, et cetera. Growth. Yeah, look, I've run an 80-person company. It'd be interesting to run a 100-person company, a 1,000-person company.
Mm,
Whether I would want to do that or just pass it on, I don't know. But you need to keep doing things. You can't,
mm.
you're either dying or you're growing.
Yeah.
There is actually no standing still. That's the
Yeah.
way I look at it.
Yeah.
And it's up to you what or how you do that.
Mm,
Um, it's not what happens to you. It's what you do about it. Now,
yeah.
one of the people I admire, Warren Buffett,
Mm,
right? I've read lots of his biography, and well, one he comes out with lots of pithy phrases. And once he was asked, if you had one piece of advice for someone, uh, investment advice or advice, what would that be? And he answered, choose the right womb to be born into or born from. Brilliant, brilliant. Because no matter what you do in life,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
happen to be born in certain particular wombs, you're set
Mm,
for life
mm.
under normal
Yeah.
measures. But that may mean that you're aimless. You don't have any challenges. You don't
Yeah.
lead a fulfilled life because of that. But
Yeah.
it's brilliant.
Yeah. It's a
Do you see
great
my
quote.
point? So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Great
you
quote.
got to you just got to keep at it, keep growing. Yeah, you can ups and downs and the rest, but you just push
Yeah.
through. Or you
Yeah.
can sit there and pity yourself and blame it on everything else. One
Yeah.
of my mentors, who I consider a mentor, very successful individual, uh, massively successful, one of the first successful Asian people in the country, as in the 80s and 90s, there were no successful Asian people that
Mm,
made it to the general public's consciousness. And I remember one of the things he said to me, we were discussing something, and he said, everything's my fault. And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean everything's your fault? You're so bloody successful and everything else,
mm,
and da 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 da. And he said, look, if uh, tomorrow, um, one of my son, I'm trying not to give away who he is. My son is walking down the road to come and visit me, and he gets hit by a car or something. That's my fault. And I said, how is it your fault? And he said, because I have a chauffeur that could go and pick him up.
mm,
That mentality is brilliant because
mm.
once you realize not everything is your fault, but everything is your responsibility,
Yeah.
then you have the power to do something about it. But if you think, oh, it's racism, well, okay,
Mm,
you can't change that, so you can't do anything about it. Oh, it's I'm missing one arm, but you
mm.
can't change that, so you can't do anything about it. So it's disempowering. But if you are actually strong enough to say, you know what, it actually comes down to me, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No matter what
Yeah.
my circumstances, then you have the ability. That's the first step in psychologically realizing that you have the ability to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
So
Super powerful, Zaf. Listen, you reminded me of a book I read called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Wilkins.
extreme
And
ownership. Okay.
yeah, a great book written by a Navy SEAL. And you'll love it. It's that kind of mentality all over. Listen, I'm aware of time, which has rapidly got away from us. I realize I've got 1,000 more questions. But if people listening to the show want to connect with you, want to reach out to you, want to find out more about Blockapt, what's the best way to do that?
Um, Probably on LinkedIn, but I get lots of LinkedIn requests. So if on the LinkedIn they used a headline that relates to this podcast, then I know it will have come through this. So I'm far more likely to respond to it.
Fantastic.
I mean, I read them
Fantastic.
all, but responding different thing.
Yeah, the same way. I am exactly the same way.
Yeah, no, I'm on LinkedIn under Zafar Karim, Zafarkarim. There might be some other Zafar Karims there, but
Mm,
if you look for Zafar Karim that's at Blockapp at the moment, then you'll get
fantastic.
me. And there's a
Yeah,
picture there which should look like me, but
you never know. You never know. We will, of course, link to Zaf's info in the show notes as well, which you can get along for free with the transcript at pushtobemore.com. Zaf, listen, Really appreciate you taking the time and coming and sharing your wisdom with us. Thanks for just being totally straight. And I just love your insights and philosophy on life. Really, really insightful. I have lots of notes. And I wish you every success with becoming the billionaire and turning the 1-pack into a 6-pack, my friend.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being very generous in your compliments. But maybe one day I'll be deserving of them. Thanks, Matt.
No problem. Thanks. Huge thanks again to Zaf for joining me today. Also, a big shout out to today's show sponsor, Orion Media. If you're wondering if podcasting is a good marketing strategy for your business, and I think it probably is, do connect with them at orionmedia.com. That's AURION media.com. And be sure to follow Push to Be More wherever you get your podcasts from, because we've got some more great conversations just like this one lined up. Well, not just like this one, because every conversation is different, but it'll be a great conversation. So make sure you are subscribed. And in case no one has told you yet today, you are awesome. Yes, you are. It's just a burden you have to bear. Created awesome. Zaf has to bear it. I have to bear it. You've got to bear it as well. Now, Push to Be More is produced by Orion Media. You can find our entire archive of episodes on your favorite podcast app. The team that makes this show possible is Sadaf Bainon, Estella Robin, and Tanya Hutzalek. Our theme music was written by Josh Edmondson. And as I mentioned, if you would like to read the transcript or show notes, you can find them on the website pushtobemore.com. That's it from me. That's it from Zafar. I appreciate you being with us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.